Hi everyone, welcome back to Diet.com Video. I'm your host Sarah, and once again I'm joined by clinical nutritionist Alexis Beck. So thank you for joining us today, Alexis.
Of course, Sarah.
During this week, we're supposed to become aware of eating disorders. Many people probably are thinking, oh, I am aware of them. I knew a girl in high school, or I read about a certain celebrity who came out admitting she had an eating disorder. What exactly is the organization trying to help people become more aware of?
I think that sometimes eating disorders may appear to be more fashion, if you will, or trend versus disease. And I think this week perhaps supports the fact that this is a real syndrome with real symptoms that can be dangerous. So I think from a clinical point of view, it is an awareness increaser, if you will.
And the newest term probably associated with eating disorders is actually backwards, disordered eating. What is the difference between an eating disorder and disordered eating?
The difference, I think, is when you've got disordered eating, it doesn't own you. You still have the disordered eating, it doesn't have you. When you have an eating disorder, it has you. An eating disorder might start out as an innocent diet, and you're in charge. And then one moment, before you know it, it turns around and it has you, and you can't control it. You can't eat. You can't stop purging. That's very different.
You've treated a lot of patients for eating disorders. Over the years, what have you noticed?
Well, certainly I've noticed that there are more and more people dealing with eating disorders, and one of my questions is this: why? What has happened that the pressure is that much more severe for women to look a certain way? So sometimes I ask myself, is this disease or dis-ease? Are eating disorders a reaction to a culture rather than something clinical? We know that it is a psychologically driven syndrome. We know that clinically. But do we sometimes see eating disordered people who are really part of a trend as opposed to, as I said, a disease? When you've got somebody who's really sick, where their blood work is under question, versus it's more of an emotional habit. You know, there's sort of an obsession, and then there's a habituation. If it's more of a habit than a disease, I think the treatment should be different. And I'm seeing more what I like to call symptomatic eating disorders than a pure eating disorder.
In the early 90s, there was the heroin chic with Kate Moss and Calvin Klein, and it seemed like eating disorders kind of were in the spotlight back then. And then later we had the Cindy Crawford. I don't know if this was the same time period here, but then all of a sudden being fit and muscular came back. And do you think that now, are we still in the fit is fabulous, or are we back to being Nicole Richie type body is what is most appealing to society?
Thin is in, and I think thin is now being associated with power. And for many girls, it's more about being thin than being beautiful. It's more important to be thin than to be smart. That wasn't always true. And I think back to the 70s, where it all started with Twiggy. That's where it all started. And we've watched the trend since. And the notion of a size 0 gene, I think if that's our goal, to be in a size 0 gene rather than to become a doctor or a dentist or a lawyer, certainly our emphases have changed. And I think that's why my office is as busy as it is. Because 1 out of 5 girls, at least, is dealing with some type of eating disorder or disordered eating.
What can these girls do if they're worried about developing an actual eating disorder?
In various communities, there are treatment organizations. Here in Boston, we have Meta. And at Meta, for $10, you can be part of a self-help group, you can see a therapist, and you can be screened to be referred to see a clinician. And a lot of the services are free. It's just a matter of being aware of what's available to you, and that's also what National Eating Disorders Week can do. It can raise awareness about what services are available in our community.